It is good to worship with you guys again. Well, sweet time. I've been reminded to remind you all that tacreading.info has also a place where you can take sermon notes. I often wonder what I could possibly say that anyone would want to write down. But we have these sermon notes, so if you would like to do that digitally, you certainly can do that if the paper doesn't work for you, and then you can email yourself those notes afterwards from that webpage. So anyway, tacreadinginfo.com, or tacreading.info, sorry. All right. There's a tragedy before us. And in times of tragedy, this one included, those who have been directly impacted or those who have somehow avoided being fully impacted, or even those who are just standing observing from the side, often begin to ask the question, why? As Christians, we of course have a lot of answers to the world's problems. And so oftentimes when people in the midst of tragedy begin to ask the question why, we begin to throw answers at them. These answers certainly are true, but they're not always helpful. Answers like, well, it just shows that we're in a fallen world. That's why this tragedy has happened. We might use the answer of, well, tragedy just reminds us that heaven is our home, not the earth. Or we might answer that the chaos in the midst of this tragedy is just reminding us of our need for a Savior. Or we may say that the material losses that we've had because of this tragedy will just helps us to understand what's truly valuable. All of those answers certainly have truth in them, but again, often are not very helpful in the time of tragedy. Because the reality is, we don't know the answer to the question why. Each person affected and impacted by tragedy will come to an understanding of the question why only as the Lord chooses to reveal. And so often, that answer does not come until we cross from this life to the next. We do, however, know and must lean on these things: the character of God, that He is indeed sovereign and in control, that He is loving, completely loving, always loving, that He is good. He always has good in mind, that He's all-knowing. He knew this was coming, and He knows what's coming. And He's wise. He knows the best way to do things, the best outcomes, the best choices. So because we don't have an answer to the question why, I want to encourage us this morning to not necessarily move past the question why, because we need to continue to wrestle with that and seek the Lord on that question. But can we, as we wrestle with the question why, can we also consider some more pertinent questions which we can respond to and can have answers to? Questions like, who needs help? What do those people who need help need? And perhaps most importantly, what can I do? How can I help? My son-in-law and my daughter and my wife just completed a trip kind of halfway across the country from Olympia, Washington to San Antonio, Texas. My daughter and son-in-law are moving there. He's going to be trained. He's in the Army. He'll be trained, do some training for the next year. And so my wife got the privilege of traveling across the country with a dog and a cat, and took 4 days and all this crazy stuff. But and of course, wanting to be here instead, and in large part because she desires to be here with you guys as well. But my son-in-law is a field medic. And so as I was preparing for this message today, the perspective and the concept of field medic came to mind. And I thought that is exactly where we're at today and what we need to be in this tragedy. See, field medics are those who respond to emergencies. And emergencies are always things that happen away from the hospital. They have to go out from the hospital, or maybe if they're volunteer firefighters like Bob and first responders, they go from their home and then they go to a fire station and then they go to the call or whatever. But it doesn't happen. Emergencies don't happen in the hospital. The emergencies don't happen. Tragedies like this don't happen, where it's comfortable. And so field medics have to go out. And when they go out, they have to first of all assess their resources so they know what they have is available. Because they don't have everything that's available in the hospital. They're limited on the resources of what they can take with them. And so they have to know what resources they have. They also have to be alert, and they have to survey the field when they get there. Survey the scene. They need to understand where the dangers lie and what are the needs. What are the critical points within this particular tragedy or emergency? They need to know what is the greatest need. And then finally, they of course have to treat the wounded. They have to care for those who are in trouble, those who are in the midst of this emergency and tragedy. And they need to know and do what's doable. Field medics in our world are generally concerned with saving physical lives. But in our context for us today, and as a church and in this particular situation, we're concerned with saving souls. We're concerned with caring for the physical needs as well of those who have been impacted by this tragedy. So the call this morning is for us to be field medics. If we are field medics, then we have to assess our resources. 1 Corinthians 12, 4-7. There are different kinds of gifts, but the same Spirit distributes them. There are different kinds of service, but the same Lord. There are different kinds of working, but in all of them and in every one, it is the same God at work. Now to each one, the manifestation of the Spirit is given for the common good. We need to evaluate and assess what are our resources. Do we have time? Time to give, to care, to listen? Do we have space to give? Do we have room in our homes maybe for people to come and stay for a time? Do we have skills that we can offer and help, whether it be labor skills or whether it be intellectual skills or whether it be emotional and relational skills? What skills do we have that we can give and use? Maybe it's finances. Finance might be a resource that you have. How can you use those resources to help? Maybe it's contacts. You just know a lot of different people, and so you have contacts, the people that you can contact and be a part of and to help get help. Bringing it to this church more specifically, as I've come to know TAC, I've come to realize that this is a church that is very familiar with pain and suffering. Throughout your history as a church, you've had some huge events that have caused hurt and pain for this church as a congregation. But also I know the individuals who make up this church, many of you have experienced your own in your own lives of suffering and pain and difficulty and tragedy. That is a resource that we have as a church. We are in a community that's suffering and in pain, and we've got experience that we can give advice and understanding and compassion and empathy that we can give because we've been there too. Maybe our house hasn't burned down, but we've experienced pain. We're familiar with it. We know how to get through it. We, of course, as a church, have hope to give. We have salvation as well to offer, that those who don't know the Lord may at this point, because of what has happened today or this week, may be seeking for something. They may be seeking Jesus. It's a resource that we have. We need to evaluate, assess what are our resources. But we also need to know what resources we don't have. For instance, we are not Jesus. We cannot heal these people. We can't fix it. We can't make it better. We can just come alongside. Jesus is the great physician. He is the one who will bring healing. Also, we need to recognize that we are not in the hospital. It's not a sterile environment that we're going out to. It's not going to be clean. It's going to be dirty. It's going to be chaotic. It's going to be things that are going to surprise us that we didn't expect. And we should, as a result, we should expect to be uncomfortable. So the first thing as field medics we need to do is we need to assess our resources. Next, we need to survey the field. Mark 2:17, Jesus said to them, "It is not the healthy who need a doctor, but the sick. I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners." In the midst of tragedy, sometimes we can have a tendency to draw together with others who are healthy and leave the sick out in the cold. May we not do that. Jesus came for the sick. Every one of us were at least at one point sick and sought healing from the great physician Jesus. And there are some in our world today, in this community, that are seeking for the great physician Jesus. So as we survey the field, we need to understand what are the dangers that lie in this disaster area, this tragedy, and this emergency. Obviously, homelessness. We have people who are lost their homes, some who have lost family or friends. The financial strain that comes from it. The depression and the despair that potentially can come as you look over your home and realize that you've lost everything and where do you go from here? Of course, there's this one too, being forgotten. Because this is a tragedy that didn't just happen one day and is over the next day. This is a tragedy that will go on for years as some seek to rebuild and try to get their lives back into some kind of sense of normalcy. And the great fear is that they will eventually be forgotten and they'll be left alone. So those are the great dangers within this emergency. And so obviously the greatest needs within that as well are that they need shelter. They need financial support. They need someone to come alongside and listen to them, to give them hope or give them a reason for hope, to be committed to them, to not just do it short term, but say, I'm here for the long haul until we get to the end of this, until things get back to some sense of normalcy. That we would also, again, be able to share our faith with them and to tell them about Jesus, who is the answer, who is the great healer, who will help them make it through all of this. Finally, as we survey the field, we also need to consider who we can reach. Our job is not to reach everyone. Our job is to reach who we can reach. the people maybe you know that have been impacted by this tragedy. That's where you start. The ones who you directly, personally know are involved in a relationship with. That's where you start. But also you could be people that your friends know, that somebody else knows that you're a friend with, and they've got somebody that has been impacted by this tragedy. You can go to there, or people you just hear about. Maybe on the news, or maybe in the paper, or maybe just having a conversation at the coffee shop. I like to go down to the coffee shop because it's a great place to be. But anyway, at the coffee shop, you hear amazing stories. This community is talking about it right now. There's a buzz. So be listening. Maybe there's someone there that is reachable for you. Or maybe it's just simply a random person that you run into. That you just, again, happen to be standing in line or happen to be walking down, somewhere down the street, and you run into them and they've been impacted, and you have an opportunity right there. We have to assess the resources that we have. Then we have to survey the field to see what are the dangers, what are the needs, and then who we can help. Who's the one that I need to help? And then finally, we need to treat the wounded. Philippians 2, 1-4. Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, then make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourself, not looking for your own interests, but each of you to the interests of others. The field medic has to choose to engage. It's not enough just to get to the scene. It's not enough just to assess what resources you have and to survey the field. You have to choose to engage. We have an opportunity to get involved. We are trained for this, church. We are equipped for this. Jesus has empowered us for this. But it's dirty work. It's going to seem awkward. It's going to seem cumbersome and just it's not going to feel right. We're going to make mistakes, but it's okay. It's also dangerous work. We're going to be leaving our place of safety. We're going to be stepping out of our comfort zones, and we might get criticized as a result. We might get rejected by some who don't want our help. We might even offend some because we've said the wrong thing or we've done the wrong thing, and they might get offended by that, but that doesn't mean we should stop trying to help. We need to continue to pursue. We might have to actually do without as well. We might have to do without sleep. We might have to do without clothing. And it might have to do without finances, without a certain amount of space that we're used to, without the comforts that we've become accustomed to. So to treat the wounded, we have to choose to engage in this dirty work, in this dangerous work. And as we do, we seek to meet needs. We seek to use the resources that God has given us as a church and individually, to use those resources to help meet the needs that are out there, to do what we can. Again, we don't have to do what we can't. We have to do what we can. Let God do what we can't, right? So that we step out and we get involved and we use the resources that we have. But also, may we pace ourselves. There is so much that can be done right now in this week that's coming. So many things that need to be done, and we need to be involved. We need to be out there. But be careful as well to pace yourselves. We don't want to burn out. We don't want to blow our wad in a sense now so that we have nothing left to give for the years that come in the future. If we're going to be committed, we have to know our limitations in order to allow us to be committed for the long haul. So that we can stay with people, that we would come alongside people, that we would listen to people, that we would cry with people. We don't need to have the answers. Let's not be Job's friends who were trying to convince Job of how he messed up. That's why this happened. May we just sit with them. If we have no answer, that's okay. Say, I don't know. But be with them. Listen with them. Help them where you can. Do what you can. We all are in this together as a community. Again, this is what we've been called to as church. And of course, when the opportunity arises, point to Jesus. Talk about Jesus. Tell them what Jesus has done for you, your own personal experience, that you would be able to celebrate and point these people to Jesus, who will bring healing, who will be the one that makes it all better. Not that everything will be restored to what it was before. It's going to be a new normal, but it is Jesus who will allow them to continue on and to have hope for the future. It is a difficult thing being a field medic. So often you feel alone. So often you're the only one. So often you're put into situations that are beyond your abilities. But again, this is what we're called to. To step out, to assess our resources, to survey the field, and then to treat the wounded as best we can with what we have. And then, in all of that, lean on Jesus. We need him. We can't do without him. It is not under our own power that we go out. It is under the power of Jesus. The testimony means nothing if we do within our own power what we can do and then say, oh, and Jesus is great. But when we go out and we do what we can, but then Jesus steps up and does even more, then we can point to Jesus and say, Jesus is great. And they'll go, yeah, he is great. Worship team, why don't you come back up? Church, we are equipped. We're equipped for this. God has prepared us for this. He has given us what we need. It's exciting to know that he has equipped us and that he's given us what we need, because then we know we can put it to use. And now's the time. The emergency, the tragedy is before us. And because we're equipped, because Jesus has prepared us, let's go out and let's help somebody. The reality is, it's time to get to work. It's time for us to care for people. It's time for us to love them. It's time for us to be there for these people in our congregation and outside of our congregation. Don't get me wrong, I'm not just talking about the lost in this community. There are many even within our congregation that are hurting, have lost everything. And they need us to come around them and support them and be there for them in the long term. We need to do that. We need to be there and to love them, to comfort them. But we need to do it on a grander scale as well. There's 130 of us or so in this room right now. Consider all of the lives that we could come alongside. Over 1,000 homes, over 1,000 families that have lost their homes. Can we come alongside them? Can we just find somebody somewhere to help out? Certainly we can. And it's exciting. As I've told you before, man, walking in faith, taking those steps of faith out of our comfort zones are the greatest places to be when Jesus calls us there. Because not only does it build the faith of those we serve, but it builds our faith as well. And we realize, oh my gosh, God is so much bigger than all of this. It changes the worship service into singing songs, praying occasionally, and listen to some guy rant for 30 minutes, to an intimate interaction and relationship with God. This is what we have. This is what we have to offer. Let's go. Amen. Stand and sing some more.